When thinking about the impact viewer voting has on BFDI, the tense drama it can create is usually what comes to mind. You know, the nail-bitingly close votes, the major upsets, the arguments, the crash-outs, the outcry from fans losing their faves. Yet, one thing that's discussed far less often are the times when a vote is super one-sided. Like, there have been some total blowouts across every BFDI season. Peeps who got demolished, wombo-comboed by their competition, who aren't talked about nearly as much as they could be. So let's take a look at what the biggest voting gaps between the last person safe and who got eliminated have been in every main season to see the under-discussed impact they've made, because these are the farthest votes in BFDI history. Our starting spot is OG BFDI, and there aren't any far votes early on, simply because there weren't many people voting. I mean, at the beginning, there were only 7 total voters, with things not becoming kinda noteworthy till Snowball was 29 votes ahead of TB, and from there the gaps steadily got larger, with Flower's second elimination being the biggest of the season, with her receiving 399 more votes than Leafy. Now I think we can all say why this one was so far. She's the main character of Season 1, it was literally the final 4, and honestly, her staying afloat against Rocky was already a bit surprising, despite her just rejoining the game. 90 seconds of her competing in the long jump challenge was all it took for people to switch up and go, "Hey, wait a minute, I hate Flower," and try to unsuccessfully get her out against Rocky, before successfully doing so against Leafy, which is pretty funny, but compared to every other season, there isn't much intrigue around Flower's second elimination due to how quick she was in and out the door again. It becomes a bit more interesting when zooming out to the other big gaps this season though. David is second with 189 votes above Spongy, and Spongy is third with 145 votes above Leafy, making everyone in the top 3 someone who rejoined or debuted later in the game. They just had no chance against the frontrunners of Fiery, Leafy, Bubble, and probably Ice Cube if she wasn't melted by that contestant vote, simply because of their popularity. And that popularity merged with Flower's haters to make the farthest vote of base BFDI. Legit, there isn't anything else to add about Flower, cause it's not like her or any of the top 3's vote-outs this season were pushed or anything, which I can't in full confidence say about pre-split BFB. That's right, we're going in release order thanks to that killer transition, and get ready for more details, cause while BFDI's biggest gap is pretty standard, there is infinitely more to be said about the 17,730 vote gap between Spongy and Donut right before the split. Now, I actually want to make a full video on Spongy at some point, so I'll be brief on the details specific to him, since what matters is that Spongy was in an okay spot on Team Ice Cube. His votes were nowhere near Bracelety and Fiery Jr., and he had a lot of sympathy after BFB 12, where no one figured out that Tree was impersonating him. You'd think he'd be safe for at least a couple more rounds, with Naily, Gelatin, or Donut being bigger targets. But that sympathy quickly turned into scorn due to BFB 14. After Donut sacrifices himself so Spongy can survive, he pulls a spaceship out of his inventory to escape the lava flow, but says there's no room for anyone else. Now this conflict is pretty layered, because while Spongy saying that his team deserves to burn in lava cause of what happened last challenge isn't cool, Naily, Gelatin, and Barfbag wanting to take his spaceship and leaving him to die right after Donut sacrificed himself for Spongy to survive is also selfish. This is all in retrospect though, because in the episode itself, Spongy is framed as purely in the wrong for refusing to give up his ride, and ends up being burned by all the blame in the situation. Blasting cannonballs at Puffball in BFB 15 only made the flames under Spongy worse, and his team losing was basically a death sentence. The fact that Naily is technically why they lost the challenge isn't even a factor, since she dodges the bottom 3, and Spongy is out with over half the total votes cast. For comparison, the second highest gap this season, between Loser and Eggy, was 10,000 votes smaller than this one. Like, this isn't even a blowout, this is a blow up, and Spongy got charred crispier than he was in BFDI 21. Needless to say, I feel negative about this elimination because of how much I like Spongy, but let's stay focused on the numbers aspect of it, cause wow, it's still crazy to think about. Now some characters getting more love than others is inevitable when you have a large cast, but unlike Flower's expected boot, Spongy's road to elimination doesn't sit right with me because it feels a bit more intentional. Again, the spaceship conflict is a real everyone sucks here situation, yet Spongy is given a much worse edit than his teammates, continues to be abrasive in BFB 15, and his elimination directly leads into loser escaping the exit, and the split, which seems convenient. Now, it's not like the vote was rigged against Spongy, but the lead up to his boot does everything it can to put him in the hot seat, and the lapse of votes he ran around Donut, who was dead for all of BFB 15, is only further proof of that. It's an elimination I see as a prime example of when Jacknjellify trying to plan ahead, in spite of viewer voting, can become a bit frustrating. There are cases that I think an episode nudging towards a certain elimination can be a good thing that leads to more structured story directions, but here it's way too obvious that they wanted Spongy dead, which stinks if you're a fan of him, or any other character who's gotten snubbed in a similar way, through amplified meanness or a lack of content. I guess in Spongy's case, you could say him joining post-split was an apology from J&J for assassinating him, but by that point, the damage had been done. Spongy gets booted immediately, and while his reputation has gotten a bit better over the years, BFB 14 still stands as a shadow over his character, which also led to this steamroll of an elimination. And speaking of post-split, let's see how voting to save can change things when it comes to voting gaps. Early post-split never had too many extreme differences, not even with Spongy, with the standout being Loser having 2,402 less votes than Taco. Now that is still a lot of people, but when following up the angry mob that Spongy had against him, these numbers are chump change. Cases like Bubble and Leafy don't have crazy gaps either, despite a lot of people saying their eliminations were set up, especially when compared to the thrashing that they got. And by they, I obviously mean Profiley, who was 9,843 votes behind Woody. Is that shit not insane? They're literally the audience favorite, a season 1 finalist, an OG Wobuncher, and they got 0 votes. Like, you think they weren't even given a bracket letter or something. Like, okay, joking aside, the biggest gaps are far and away from Teardrop and Gelatin. This makes sense, given that they were between 2 people at the end of the season, but when looked at in tandem with each other, they present another pushed situation that's perpendicular to what happened with Spongy. Starting with Teardrop, she fell 14,016 votes behind Gelatin, and given Gelatin's momentum after Lollipop got out, along with Teardrop's ruthless side shining a bit too bright in the past couple episodes, her boot isn't very surprising. She simply wasn't as popular as him, and now Gelatin was looking unstoppable in the final 2 based on this performance. That is, until BFB 29, where Gelatin may have gotten some content while being interviewed and trying to save BFB, but Flower is given a lot more through being ignored by Purpleface and ultimately saving the show. Now, I cannot for the life of me find a screenshot to back up what I'm about to say, so take it with a grain of salt, but I believe that Sam Thornberry has said that he expected Gelatin to win the season and gave Flower some more attention to even the playing field. This tracks with previous votes, but in a funny twist of fate, this extra attention Flower received only made the opposite happen, with Flower handily winning against Gelatin by 20,651 votes to make the biggest gap of the season. Unlike what happened with Spongy, whose downfall was caused by negative press, Gelatin's unimpressive showing here was due to the positive press given to Flower, and like with Spongy's elimination, I have mixed feelings on how this all went down. To start, I think that worrying about Gelatin smoking Flower in the final vote is totally reasonable given how well he did against her in BFB 28, but I think the whole saving the season part to Flower's content carried a lot more weight than expected, and is what completely turned the tide against Gelatin. In fact, tide is a soft way of putting it. because falling 20k votes short is wild, and it's more like BFB29 sent a goddamn tsunami at Gelatin's chances of winning. Point is that the unbalancedness of Gelatin and Flower's edits is what leaves me so mixed about this blowout. Like, personally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of Gelatin, and I was happy Flower won, but seeing how BFB29 was a way better episode for her, and that the vote wasn't even close, just isn't very satisfying. It's especially unsatisfying when compared to BFDIA 24, which I'd say does a solid job at making book and needle relevant, without any obvious bias, let alone a season-wide bias, which some people argue that Flower had throughout all of post-split. Even with his anticlimactic loss though, Gelatin at least made it to the final two before getting crushed, and got to have a big moment in the finale. But his loss is another case of how J&J could be a bit too obvious in trying to sway the votes, mainly during this era of the show. Again, the way BFDIA 24 gave book and needle focus was way better, and it makes me really interested to see how close that final vote will be, even if the likes and dislikes counting for the winner style it has will make for an odd comparison to BFB's final vote, along with the rest of BFDIA's eliminations. And hey, would you look at that? We got another S-tier transition, so let's talk about BFDIA. For the early blowouts, I should mention how Puffball had the highest gap pre-hiatus, but I also want to highlight Yellowface, cause while his vote ended up in 4th place, his boot is still very memorable to me. Just seeing the graph bounce to show him doubling Spongy in dislikes got the gears turning on this video idea. And if you take out the purple hating, his reason for being such a consensus boot is very in line with the rest of the top 3. All of them were targeted for being mean to someone else, with Ruby in 3rd, Ice Cube in 2nd, and Pin being the meanest, with 21,498 dislikes above Coiny. Now it'd be easy to say this is a repeat of BFDI Flower, but I think there are more factors at play standing alongside her meanness. For one, it was Final 5, and she was only against Coiny, who has always been popular, and was getting lots of support after Pin betrayed him in BFDIA 18. That's not all though, because to me the most overlooked reason of why Pin got so many dislikes is that the seeds for her elimination were growing as soon as she got her face back. She was already bottom 2 against Bommy after Spore Day, bottom 3 against Pencil and Needle Free Smart in BFDIA 17, and had she not won immunity that episode, there's a decent chance that she would have gotten out over Nickel, and if not Nickel, then she'd have to deal with Fries in BFDIA 18 after what has to be her most callous episode, which would have surely led to her elimination had she not won immunity again. That inability to vote her out just made people angrier, beefing up the desire many had to vote her out to a level stronger than Tom Stoltman? IDK, pretend I said Gojo, but yeah, if not earlier, then BFDIA 18 for sure put Pin on death row, with no chance of surviving against any of her peers. So come BFDIA 20, when she's finally up for elimination, the droves of voters who were eager to get her out had their chance, resulting in BFDIA's most distant elimination. And that's really all I have on Pin. It is still comparable to Flower's second boot, but definitely has more depth with how long it took for her elimination to fester. With her out of the way though, we only have TPOT left to discuss. Now before I did any research into this topic, there was one vote I thought for sure would be a frontrunner, being basketball's 7,705 vote shutout after getting no focus in TPOT 14. This one also stands out to me cause while I expected her to get eliminated, I thought it would at least be kinda close given how important she was in Robot Flower's arc and TPOT 13, but no, she got barely half of TV's votes. And yeah, I was hyped to see my goat survive, but it does sting to see a character I still like go out on such a low note. At least she doesn't have to deal with the label of farthest teapot vote though, cause to my surprise, this vote is only 3rd place, and maybe 4th depending on how you look at the numbers, because we have some muddy waters to deal with thanks to Cloudier losing extra hard. Not only were the bottom 2 eliminated, but people got to vote twice, which makes Yellowface's 17,252 votes and Pillow's 10,905 votes behind Donut a bit dubious. If we keep these numbers as is, then Yellowface and Pillow are the top 2, but I think we could be a bit more accurate. If we account for people having 2 votes, and divide the gaps of Yellowface and Pillow by 2, then Yellowface moves to 2nd place, and Pillow ends up under basketball. That leaves us with one question though. Who is this mysterious number 1? Well, this was a shock to me, having just talked about her, but the biggest gap at the moment is Bottle having 9,017 less votes than Lie and TPOT 21. I mean, considering her competition and history of never being outside the bottom 3 of any vote she's been a part of, I still see Bottle getting 27,000 votes as a win. That shows how far she's come, yet she just couldn't keep up with her team. Hosting TPOT 17 and still failing to break her bottom 3 curse was already a terrible sign, and her remaining competition being Penn, Lie, and Mr. Popular after a much smaller episode for Bottle and TPOT 19 is what ultimately sealed her fate. Oh, and if you want to consider Yellowface as the highest based on numbers alone, you can explain his elimination in the exact same way. He did pretty well on the S, but Cloudier gave him tougher competition, and being in the bottom 2 against Barfbag was a big red flag. He got really lucky with the winning streak Cloudier went on after TPOT 13, because it's the only thing that kept him around. And while he did get that new friendship with Price Tag, it would have been hard for Yellowface to survive a single elimination, let alone a double boot. I mean, he was close-ish to Pillow, so I guess the friendship kinda helped him, but nevertheless, Yellowface was in the same position as Bottle, both are comedic characters, both got eliminated with the same amount of votes to save, and I just so happened to cast one of those votes in both cases. They have a fun parallel no matter who you'd say is the true farthest vote, but seeing as how the next elimination is another situation of having 2 votes for one team, and that we still have way more eliminations to get through in TPOT, I doubt they'll be sharing the throne for too much longer. And with that, we've gone through every season. As of right now, the next vote reveal on the horizon is the BFDIA finale, and like I said earlier, I don't expect it to have as major of a gap as Gelatin and Flower, or Pin and Coiny for that matter, since Pin's 21,498 vote divide between her and Coiny is the biggest of all the current gaps. Who knows what'll happen though? No matter how wide or narrow the battle between Book and Needle ends up, every BFDI vote still gives a cool snapshot of how people felt at the time, even in cases where you can tell the writers had a certain outcome in mind. Really, I just wanted to show how these one-sided votes can still be engaging to discuss, because while they aren't as flashy as an upset or close result, they still tell interesting stories, and will continue to do so as the show continues. That's all I gotta say. If you haven't, please subscribe, like, hype, share, hit that bell, comment if you have any thoughts, and thank you for watching.